If you clicked on this video today, chances are you own some of these Derwent Inktense products. I have the pencils and I also have the blocks. And wow, these things are a little tricky. And so I'm here today as a newbie to try to share some of the things I've learned over the past few months, actually about 2 months of using them. And hopefully what I've learned may help you. I know as you get better at something, you kind of forget what it was like to be a newbie. So that's what I'm here for today, just to share with you what I'm learning, and hopefully you can get some useful tips from this video. Let's do this. I'm Stephanie and this is Studio Gigi. On to the video. Okay, so key to using Derwent Inktense products is choosing your paper. A smoother textured paper is going to show brush strokes and pencil marks, whereas a rougher texture, you're going to be able to blend those out with water. I tried Bristol paper, marker paper, different types of watercolor paper, cold and hot press. And my favorite out of all of those was the way that cold press watercolor paper did with this product. It just, you were able to get rid of those brush strokes and the pencil marks, and the layering was beautiful. The vibrancy of the color was beautiful. I did try multiple papers. I tried Bristol paper, by Strathmore, and you could see every brush mark. I'm going to try to slip in some footage of where I tried these different papers. I tried the Bristol, some marker paper. I even tried canvas paper. I was just really curious how it would look, and it was interesting because it really dulled the colors down. I tried fluid, hot press, and cold press paper, and I did not like either of those. And then for other watercolor paper, I tried Arteza, Inktense, and Arches. And 3 points to you if you know the paper I chose. It was Arches. My results were beautiful. So, choosing your paper just depends on what you want your artwork to look like. I have a certain style I want to show up in my artwork. I don't always like paint brush marks to show or pencil marks to show, but if that's something you're going for, then you might want to choose a smoother textured paper. So whenever I start a project, I pull the colors that I think I want. Now I have the 72 set, these were a gift. And I have the 72 set in the pencils and in the blocks. And I have not swatched all of those to date because I've not used them all. So generally what I do is I go in and I pick the colors that I think I want for the project. And then I will swatch them out and then make adjustments as needed. You always want to swatch your colors because they don't look like they do in the pigment block, of course, but they also don't look like they do on the tips of the ends of the pencils that show you the color. One of my favorite ways to use both the blocks and the pencils was the same way I use a pan palette. I'm wetting a brush and sticking it in the little pan. And you can do that with the Inktense blocks. Just wet your brush along the top of the block to get the desired pigment amount. You can vary the water, add more water to it, and you can do the same thing with the tip of the pencil. Just use it like a little pan palette. It works really easily that way. It's actually very doesn't make a big mess that way. Now, the other way I like using them does kind of make a big mess. I use a palette knife to scrape off some of the pigment on the Inktense blocks and then add water to that and just mix that up. And I actually like that way if I'm trying to get a little more texture. And I'll show you some work that I did doing it like that. It does add some interest to the piece. So the way that I like to use the pencils is to get texture. So I will let a layer dry and then add my texture with the pencil, if it's drawing, whatever, and then I'll either let that wet it and let it dry completely and then come back over it with another layer, or just add that detail to my finished piece. So as far as how this medium performs, some things that you need to know when you want to use the Derwent Inktense products. The colors are beautiful and they layer very well. One of the things you want to keep in mind is you always want to go from light to dark, and you always want to let your layers dry before you add the next layer of paint. And that goes for also if you put a wash down and you want to go over with a pencil. I chose to let that layer dry before I went over with pencil because I did use pencil to add some texture, but I always wanted these things to dry. I did use a watercolor technique of wet on wet, but in a way that the layer was dry, and then I would wet it with just clear water and then go over it with my brush using an Inktense block pigment. And then I could work the paint up to do some shading or just get a different color gradient. When you want your color pigments to be more opaque, just adding some of the Inktense white block will do the trick. So another way I found that you can use the Inktense pencils or blocks is as an underpainting. So what I did for this is I chose just a very light color and I did a simple illustration of a flower. Used this color, a light yellow color, and did out my flower just as an underpainting like you would normally do. And then I used watercolor over the top of it. And to compare, I did the same illustration using a watercolor underpainting and then coming over the top of it with the same watercolor. And it's supposed to help the vibrancy. It also helps the watercolor, vibrancy, because not as much of the watercolor is soaking into the paper because the Inktense forms kind of a layer there. So, you know, as watercolors dry, they do become less intense and they just fade a little bit. But this actually helps them to not fade as much. So you can also use a light colored Inktense pencil as a sketch pencil for your watercolors because it is going to completely disappear as you add the watercolor. A darker pencil will not completely disappear. And, you know, again, that's up to your personal choice of how you want to use these products and how you want your work to turn out. And finally, this is not so much a tip as just practical advice, and practical advice for pretty much anything in the art supply realm, or really anything, honestly. Just get your supplies and take your sketchbook out and play around with them. Just use them in different ways. Take it into a no judgment zone and just have some fun with them. Play around. Use some different techniques I talked about here. Come up with your own. Just experiment. You may discover something completely new. So those were just a few things that I found on my little short Inktense journey. I've only been doing it for a couple of months and I expect to find out more as I go along and more detailed work. I plan to share those on my channel as I find them. And if you found this video helpful or useful in any way, would you please give it a thumbs up? Frankly, it really helps my little channel and is very encouraging for me to want to continue to make videos. You know, sometimes you just wake up and you're not getting any traction. It's a small channel, it's a new channel, and you know, the subscribers that I have and the people that comment on my videos and give me thumbs up, I so appreciate it. I'm just right there on the cusp of 100 subscribers. Woo-hoo. I mean, honestly, it's a big deal. Thank you so much for stopping by and watching my video. And until next time, see you later. Bye-bye.